Welcome to Spirit Baby Radio. I am your host, Kelly Meehan, Spirit Baby medium, medical intuitive, and mentor. I believe we are entering into a new psychic structure of our reality that embodies deeper trust, self-love, and fearless integrity. Our New World energy needs us all to make space for it so we can support consciously conceiving parents, true intuitive pregnancies, and trusting the nature of birthing babies upon our lands with co-creation of heart. I thank you personally for tuning into all things spiritual and earth grounding, conversations that support each other and teach us to be open, free, and thrive within autonomous living and with the spark of wisdom. This is Spirit Baby Radio. Welcome to episode 169, July 7th, 2023, Womb Wisdom as Medicine, bringing a sacred model of birth care for everyone. What is womb wisdom? How do you bring sacred care into a medical model? What is a birth keeper? What ways can you become a conscious, informed woman from conception into birth? Special guest here. I'm always excited when I say that. Special guest, Dr. Gori Lowe. Did I say your name right? I gotta reaffirm that.
Yeah, perfect, Gori.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And she completed MBCHB and has been working in women's health for the past 15 years in rural South Africa and India. The birth of her son during medical school transformed her direction in life to focus on empowering and supporting women during pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. With time, Dr. Gori has developed a sacred model of birth for women and birth keepers to align with a different language of birth that is in alignment with the sacred and natural. Through working with women and exiting the medical system, she has come to know the wisdom of her womb and the importance of this for women's health care. She has dedicated her life time to teaching and consulting for women to follow their own innate healing and trust of their body using botanicals, lifestyle, reflective tools, healing circles. Currently, she lives in South Africa with her husband, 2 sons, and 5 cats. I love that. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. Nice to be here with you.
Yeah, and I always like to go into like, how did we meet? I sometimes don't remember the exact moments. I think we've always been spying on each other for a long time on and off and just seeing each other pop up in virtual reality world. But everything is energy,
Exactly.
right? And then I
Yeah.
supported a class with your community, and that was really beautiful with all these amazing women just showing up with their hearts and with just the sacredness of life.
It
And
was.
so, and then I was like, well, you have to come on my podcast and share because we started getting to really interesting topics about, yeah, I love this medical model, sacred, like, can we put those words together? Sacred medical model.
Is that a question?
It's like a statement and a question, but I mean, do you know, I love that because when I was connecting with your website, I was saying I took a bunch of these questions that you have, like you talk about your
Yeah.
mission and service, sacred awareness to women, and looking for that. I like that. Bring the heart back to medicine and looking for a deeper approach to how women heal, and and one of the things you have here that really brings reflection is, are you frustrated with the limits of conventional medicine? Like simply being offered, painkillers, hormones, or surgery is not the language you want for healing your body and feeling great again. And I want to kind of step into there a little bit more about the work that you're doing right now and anything else you want to share about what's brought you even to this place.
Well, thank you so much. This is such a beautiful question to kind of really just share my journey and what it became for me as a woman and going through studying medicine, kind of as we all do, starting with I want to help people heal, and then realizing that, well, perhaps medicine isn't actually going to teach us that. And then what is our definition of healing? And then in the middle of medicine, I already had these kind of questions because I was a spiritual seeker, and I had actually dropped out of medicine after first year and gone to an ashram and meditated basically for 7 years and then gone back to medicine. So these are not I came back to medicine knowing that this was not what my soul wanted for healing, but there was a certain kind of curiosity that was leading me to just be so hungry for the clinical information and the whole hospital setting. I loved being there, but my heart didn't resonate. So there was always that question for me, and it was very well answered in my time in the ashram and meditating and going deeper into Vedic philosophy and practice. But when in third year of medicine, when I had my first child at home, that birth kind of pivoted me into such a depth of sacred connection with a feminine. And it really opened up to me in my birth when I could feel it. And I could just feel like there was this absolute, I can almost see it, like there was this light and this power that was coming from a very divine mother source, which needed to come through me, and I needed to get out of the way and surrender to that. And in that surrender, the depth of connection, I think, was so transformative that the birth transformed me into just kind of being a spiritual seeker and mind body medicine into a depth of what I didn't even realize was becoming womb medicine. So then I carried on through medicine, now having my son and, doing all the attempts of conscious parenting. And that's when I would have kind of come across you around the same time, 15 years ago, perhaps. He's going to be 18 soon. And you were also very much on that sacred spiritual path. And then through my work, I left medicine, but what opened up to me as I was, I don't mean this to be a history, but I'm going to get to the point of how the sacred and the womb wisdom opened up to me from medicine. And so I completed medicine and have 3 years post medicine to work in the hospitals here. And after that, I left and I apprenticed with my home birth midwife to unschool basically obstetrics and be able to sit with women during birth in the way that I knew women needed to receive this empowerment. Because I went through a whole series of disillusionment and maternity activism after witnessing the training I was going through. So I became very passionate about this. And then after my second son was born at home and I was doing home births and supporting more and more women and really kind of getting to know this deep inner wisdom and what women are capable of and searching for just by being with women and being at this with pregnancy and birth opened up a lot of depth further to me. And as I came out of my second postpartum and ventured more into kind of your journey follows your personal journey into menstruation and our womb cycles, and then things kind of catapulted as they do because you enter a whole different language. And I'm still, in this journey, I'd say. But what completely became very, very clear to me was that our womb is our source of health beyond what we know health is, and the potential of a woman to experience the depth of pleasure and satisfaction and fulfillment and bliss and contentment and all these beautiful high conscious vibrational emotions that we strive for because we know they are innate in us is possible through the portal of our womb. And that for me became healing, like thriving and healing and all of that. And to see women's gynecology and diagnoses be contained in a framework of what it is on medicine and clinically and gynecology excuse me, is what also up for me that the whole politics behind it, and actually that the power of a woman is deeply subdued and vilified. Why? Because it is so sovereign. It is so unneeding anyone else. It is actually points us to become our own healer, but not a healer, not like health, like a thriver. That's kind of brings it to a circle of how it's say this is what womb wisdom has come to mean to me, to medicine.
Yeah, I love this term womb wisdom, and I'm sure it has so many different connections. And I feel like you just kind of put it in a beautiful little box, in a little gift box and bow, and how it all unfolded. It's like, and I love how you actually said that you love the medicine, you loved being a part of that, and that we are all kind of healers of our own journey. But you're right, and I know we've like mentioned this before, is like especially within maternity. I know in every country has different numbers, and I know in America, last I heard, I'm not up on the stats, but that the care and death of mostly women now, actually in this past year, I just heard someone speak saying in, I think it was 2022 or 2023, that they found more deaths were from mothers were dying, not the babies. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. Why is this happening, right? And it typically is women of color, actually. And I could see why there's so much advocacy and push for the care of for women, and I do feel like, yeah, people can always do better, and but also there's a model that's put into place that is old, and that maybe is man-made and needs to be changed and altered. And I know they have changed and altered through the higher organizations to change these models. But I feel like the energy that you share and the work is like really bring it back to the individual. How are, it's like, how are we empowering the women and the birth keepers? And maybe you can even define what a birth keeper is. Those that are tuning in may be like, I don't know what that means. um, to hold the sanctity and the heart of where women are, because we don't live in each other's bodies, right? And maybe that's the old model, like, well, you got a uterus, you got skin, you got muscles, so therefore you must all be the same, like robots, right? And as we know with birth, it's fluid, it's movement, it's energy, and it's being obstructed. We know this. I mean, it's not like we're saying anything that's like not unheard of, but and this is where, pushing to high intervention, highly traumatized women, traumatized babies, and then it becomes like, I don't want to say fashionable, but almost acceptable. Do you know what I mean? Like cesarean births have a purpose, but they've almost become an acceptable way to birth, and women are scared. I feel like they tell women, you have to have this, right? And then I feel like when I talk to a lot of these women over the years, most of them didn't, when you hear their story. And it's not about blame or like shame on you, you suck or anything, but it's more of like, wow, that's what happened. That's what happened in those, societies, in those spaces that then created that experience. But then how do we then empower women?
Yeah. And
It's a big,
it
it's a
is
lot
a
to say.
very sensitive, it's very
Yes.
sensitive because it hits us right where um it's very raw and it's very primal, and where we store our trauma
Hmm.
and where we store our mother's trauma and where we store our ancestors' trauma. And then it's not only about us, there's a whole nother being involved, which is the
Yeah.
baby. And yeah, there's a lot of fear. There is a lot of fear that gets, it's basically a fear model. And
Mm,
I do get more surprised every time I hear how difficult many women find it to find groups where they can, or just like they go to socials and they say, oh, I'm planning a home birth. They will get such negative feedback or all the horror
mm,
stories. And I'm so surprised this is still going on, because um, I find there's been such an increase of information and
hmm
resources and activism, and And I think a lot of it is coming out. This was my theory before COVID hit, and then that just proved it all. That before COVID, I was going to say that the fall of obstetrics is going to be the first fall of medicine. That was kind of my theory, because it's going to hit women where it hurts too much to ignore. And once you have realized the potential, like I did, of what's possible, and once you feel you see, it's so sensitive because you really don't want to ostracize or polarize, or it's such a personal journey for women. But the women who are resonating, that's who we're talking to. And the women who aren't resonating find their source of resonance somewhere else, and that's fine. And it's a very humbling journey in this world, because you keep getting kind of like you keep getting your perspective blown open and humbled. So, but for the people who are, who feel, you'll come to being more active or more emotive or passionate about what you want in your next birth, or about what you wanted in your birth, when you might have had a birth trauma. And unfortunately, more and more people are receiving birth trauma because we are receiving interventions that are not in alignment with the physiological birth, and there's a physiological payoff. There has to be. And the payoff is that we are, as humans, we are primed for connection. And it's that connection we're always going to be hungry after when it's not met. And we have emotional milestones in our perinatal, in our gestation, and in our first few years of life. And they are about connecting, and feeling accepted, and like you are belonging, and that you are valuable and worthy to take up space. And when a lot of psychotherapists, I mean, this is how perinatal psychology came around, did more and more, experiences or hypnobirthing, the traumas that were coming up for people were from their perinatal time, their time in the womb, and their births. And so that became a kind of a whole scientific evidence. I think I'm losing track.
No, this is good.
I can't. Okay, so I've lost the question though. Remind me of the question.
So coming back to just the empowerment of women, we just talked about a lot of things, but just the empowerment of women, like how, being your own advocate.
Yeah.
There's so many. Go ahead.
It hits us where it hurts, and then we rise up. We rise up strongly. And when you rise up strongly from that experience, you realize too much. And once you've realized too much, you can't trust the authority anymore, but you can trust your inner authority. And you learn how to discern. So it's not like, oh, medicine is awful and cesareans are all bad. But and following your womb wisdom doesn't mean you only have like a hands-off natural birth. Following your womb wisdom means you can tap into your womb, and you will know when you need to do something. The doing something isn't bad. It's just doing it when it's not in alignment.
Yeah.
Cesarean's not like evil. It's like, it's a beautiful surrender of our body, especially when it's not what we want. It's like the highest surrender we can do for our baby, in one sense.
You said something really powerful, and it's like, are you doing it just to do it, right? Or is the body giving a different message? And I think that is the tricky part. And this is where I go into intuition. Embodiment really begins even way before conception, right? And sometimes people get a crash course in pregnancy. But I hear things all the time with just, it's such a big area. And I know like there's so much to it. Like how then can we go inward and trust that my body says I don't want to do this test, or I feel this doesn't feel right. And it's like having the voice to say that, I think, is where women get twisted up, or they go, oh, I'm just going to do it because that's what everybody does, or that's what they do. That's what this, clinic or doctor does. But I feel like a lot of my work, I was like, well, why can't we question things? Why can't we just sit with ourselves and really begin to, trust more and more? And I totally understand that there's trauma. There's major traumas that people have, pushed down, and some are just coming up. But I feel like as long as we're identifying it, because, as you said, even cesarean births, it has a purpose. And but just to do it, I'm sure a lot of women do. I know that. I'm not trying to pretend that it doesn't exist. And I think that wherever our birth is for our own origin and our own birth experience, that, you know, regardless, it's trauma regardless. And it's not pretending that it's not, but it's also not going, and whatever a woman feels about it, that's her own experience. It's like, oh, I feel like I hear a lot of, back in when I started my work, it was birth healing, actually. That's what I was doing. And I was dealing with a lot of trauma around stories of birth, and so raw and so present, and it felt so unresolved for a lot of women. They're just trying to find some feeling inside that felt normal and good, but
Mm.
it's like, no, you've had trauma, and especially initial trauma, physiological, emotional, spiritual trauma, and you talk about lineage. It's like it needs space to just be with, without like, oh, I got to go and do this and that. And it's like, and I feel like that's where people maybe even go into avoidance, like they're trying to jump away. And that's where the suppression comes. That's where the body pain comes. That's where the mental anguish, then it's like, oh, and it's not, people aren't doing it on purpose. It's literally survival. And it's something that some women, it may have to mourn until they feel like they've transformed through that frequency, to be honest, right? We can stay in the pain and suffering of a birth's past. And I did with my older one for sure. I had a home birth transfer, and it was like a mess. And I was treated very poorly by the medical system for it. And yet I was highly traumatized, bad. And then I had to be in that space, and postpartum depression, even feeling, I remember sitting in the rocking chair holding my son, and I was alone. I didn't have community. I remember looking at him going, what if I just put him on the bed, walk away, and just disappear? And I was like, I'm not going to kill myself, but I was like, I want to die. And I was like, I don't even know. I was like, I want to die. And I'm like, how do I do that? How do I die?
Yeah.
And what I realized for me, not just the trauma and the lack of community, I feel like a lot, how I look at it energetically, postpartum depression, where you get to that place of death, I feel like when we're rebirthed from women to mothers, that there's a huge death in that, because now my life is completely different. And some people like me and my history and lineage, I just know what
Mm-hmm.
to do with it. It was like so overwhelming. I didn't have that community. And you just said that before. I was like, oh, it would have been nice to have like a home birth community. And I did get, like, someone said to me one time, lawyer, doctor, of course, lawyer, found I was having home birth, and just randomly he's like, you shouldn't do that. And it's like, who are you to even say that? And what I would tell people is, wow, you're very uncomfortable with what I feel is right for me, but I'm gonna like give them back their energy. And I tell women to do that. That's their issue. That's not your issue. That's their own fear, and whatever that is, even maybe, as you
Yeah.
said, maybe even coming back to their birth in the world.
Yeah. That's a lot
Yeah.
to, yeah. Um, what you were saying in the beginning was a deeply feminine wisdom, womb wisdom approach to this, because what we're carrying in our womb and what we feel as pain is it's unfelt trauma in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, so much of it comes to almost mothering ourselves
Mm-hmm.
so that we can feel it and feel safe in that. And that happens in women's circles, that happens in certain settings or retreats, or in your own. It can happen in different ways, I guess. but for me, that's a very visual thing, that we are so tenderly mothering ourselves, that we can hold ourselves when we are feeling those hard feelings, so we can heal them.
And something
Another,
else, yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, the beauty of storytelling.
Yes,
Uh,
storytelling, absolutely.
yeah, and
Especially with
especially
birth.
birth story.
Yes.
Yeah, just the beauty of telling the person the story again and telling it. I mean,
Yes.
if I tell you probably my son's birth, I'll probably choke up and tear. It was like 18
Oh,
years ago.
oh.
Um, but um, that that's the beauty of every time you tell a story. There's something else. There's something you get it from a different perspective. There's something which shifts every time, and eventually you don't feel you need to tell that story in that traumatic way, because it doesn't hold that hinge for you anymore. And it's not something you can almost control or manipulate. You actually have to deeply kind of just surrender into the process again and again and again, and feel it, allow yourself to allow it to integrate. And that's, I was listening recently to Pam England and her approach with the birth stories, and she was telling the story of Inanna's descent, and then her ascent, her descent into that underworld, and then her
Mm.
ascent again to rise up from those wounds. And it's a very beautiful story, the way it's woven into integrating our birth and our labor and our birth story, in not in an endless way,
Mm.
in a way of beautiful kind of resolution, but without this kind of effort, or like, why aren't I healed yet? Or
Yeah, I love the storytelling. It's so powerful and it's such a beautiful reminder because we all have stories and to tell it, I find in the birth healing community is like really powerful. But like you said, I feel like for me, I can say I told the birth story from upside down, from right side, from the left side, from the bottom. You know what I'm saying? Like I felt like I had a lot to say in different ways. And as we evolve, the story changes. Like I know my everything leading up to my first birth, like the labor was hard and there was a lot of fear actually. Even though I was really cared for, I actually had somebody come in through this birth center and even 12 years ago, home birthing, there was no home birthing centers, or there's only like two in this big city of California, LA. Now there's so many and it's so incredible. There's so much more energy, like, and connection. And
wow,
so in that time, it was like there really wasn't much happening, maybe three. And so I remember I had somebody come in and do hypnosis with me, and she's very gifted. I literally felt zero pain. Like I can't even explain it, but whatever we did together. But then when she left, I was like, uh-oh, I'm back into that space. And then, things kind of shifted and it was like there was so much storytelling for that. And now, 12 years later, I know in my heart that, you know, my heart says like I feel really healed around it, but I also know the story's still there. I cannot change that story, right? I can change the energetic and the perception of how I feel in my body now. But I know that it was a long, long journey of healing, but I also felt like it was a very lineagistic word I made up, very much connected to lineage in my reality of like, and I knew that when I knew that being pregnant with him, this is so much more than me. I'm terrified.
wow.
I'm not going to pretend like, oh, it's so beautiful and great. And it was like, that storytelling. And I don't really tell the story much anymore, but I do go into the darkness with it because I'm not going to pretend that it was just magical. But my second birth was, challenging, hard and good, but it was also at home. It was very magical. It
Mm.
was such a different experience. And so some would say, "Oh, did you heal that from the first?" Maybe a little bit, but I never held them
Mhm.
to some type of requirement. Um, and so it was like completely different. And I know the potentiality of our traumas and fears really create, subconscious obstacles. And we just have to, we won't know it. but we get to heal together, as you said. We get to come in circle and share our hearts. And I think that's why we both run circles for others, right?
Yeah.
In beautiful
Yeah.
ways where people feel like women, feel held and loved. And
Yeah.
I know with my energy, but I know with you, they feel safe. You're a very safe energy to be with. And so that's huge. That is
Thank you.
huge because otherwise it's like, and then just, yeah, to be seen and for whatever that unfolding is. And then, something else you said, I'm kind of go off on a tangent here, but I don't want to miss it. The origin of our own births. That's birth psychology we were talking about before we jumped on was, you know, our births I mean, how are they not affecting us becoming pregnant and then having our own birth? And I've actually seen that in people's energy where I was like, oh, something's going on with them as an embryo. Something's going on with them when they were in pregnancy. And it's really fascinating because it can
Yeah.
create ripples of like needed attention, we'll say.
Absolutely. I've got an incredible story I can share, which is
Yeah.
just so vivid around that. Um, it was in India last year, and there was a couple, and I didn't meet them for so long. They came a bit late in the pregnancy, and she spoke very, very little English. I think she was Russian and he was Ukrainian, and they were a couple. And when she went into labor, I was on WhatsApp with them for a while before I came, and the doula, who was Russian, she went because she could speak the language as well. She was there ahead of me. And what she described was that the husband was in a complete panic attack, like almost screaming and banging his, he was just not handling her pain. And
Wow.
she was doing really well and progressing very well. And she was, so it was quite forceful and she was intense, and he was having this whole like very extreme reaction. So the doula asked the mum, what, why does she think he's acting like this? And he had a traumatic birth himself. He
Mm,
he was born and he almost died. So he spent some time in the NICU, really struggling for his life. And so when he
wow.
was there holding space for her birth, it wasn't something he anticipated or knew about,
Yeah.
but but that happened. He was going through that, and she ended up having a really beautiful birth, and everything was fine. And he was he went through this extreme kind of like relief. And it was just such a profound kind of experience of something that is often much more subtle. Like
Mm,
might
yes.
not be so conscious of these things, or
Yes.
we could, but um it was deeply moving to see that there was like a courage.
Wow.
He was breaking through this with a courage, and he did, and he did to hold that space his way, and it worked out. Yeah. So that story brings it very much to life for me. But I think there's definitely, I do believe that the kind of the imprinting that we get, or
Mm,
our nature, or many things about us happen, in the womb. And I had also some powerful kind of experiences with it recently, and connecting my
mm.
own womb time. And it's it's quite incredible. But
And
anyway,
that's,
yes,
yeah. Well, and
it
that's
does
the
often
thing.
affect.
Yeah. That's the thing,
It
as you
can affect
shared,
and then
like
it cannot affect.
Like
I
well, yeah, and it depends on your birth. Like maybe it's not a part of the journey that you have to go there, right? Um, but our foundation in this reality and world, it really is impactful into the psychological and spiritual people that we become. And so I know that, and some would even say that there's personality types. I've learned about that through birth psychology and cesarean born because I was cesarean born. And so when I talk about my birth story, and I have talked about it here and there quite often, and even yesterday it came up. And people don't know when I said, "Oh," I was like, "Yeah," I said I was born into trauma. Like that was my first moments of life. And so I'm not going to say, "Oh, then my life was perfect and good after." It actually really wasn't. It was very hard. And I had a lot of sickness because to me the
Mhm.
sickness was a lot of emotional energy that needed a release through me and through a mother that was traumatized herself and sexually abused and
Right.
physically and then diagnosed with mental illness. So that's my mother, right? And like, oh my goodness. And I just was saying yesterday that and I say it with my own pride because it's true. And in a sense of that, I was born a non-labor cesarean breech. And so like you're like, huh. And so that's a lot to come. And I know our birth stories live inside us. I remember I was asked for my master's program. I thought this is interesting. They actually said to get into the school, they wanted you to write your own birth. And I'm like, oh, do I even know that? I was like not sure at the time. And I sat there in front of the computer and I just started typing and crying. I was like, wow. And it made me realize that we were all at our births, even though there's no, um, people go, well, there's no, the brain or whatever. And I can talk about the soul, but there's a science to it too. Once the spine is born, right? The nervous system, and this is more your language, that's where memory and information then becomes stored and into the physicality and into the emotional and spiritual. And so we have conscious awareness and connection, even just based out of that nervous system, if we want to look at it from the spine space. And I'm sure there's more medical terms I'm not really touching so eloquently. And so from that space, then how do we not know, how we're born? It's a part of us. And I do encourage people, if, those tuning in, if you're on a conception journey in a struggle or even dealing with loss, come back to your own birth, really sitting with what does that even mean? And it's okay not to have the answers. It's just like allowing it to even be in the space to explore that foundation can be very impactful to you becoming mother. It could even be the obstacle or the deeper subconscious, story that's like not, it's like, you know, it wants to be birthed. And so, yeah, I kind of share my story at times when it comes up, but it's like it is what it is, like that's how I was born and it wasn't happy and it was but again, it's like this is where I feel like the acceptance and the healing of it that's brought me into this work. It's brought me into, more of what comes.
Yeah, because I have no doubt that your mother was doing what she thought was absolutely the best thing for
Yes.
you and her.
Yeah. I love that you said that. It's true.
Yeah. Yeah. I I agree. I agree that that our wounds hold so many stories and memories. Going back to what you were saying about the development, what I love reading about is the development of cerebellum and how the
Mm.
cerebellum is the storehouse for the feminine. And then you work more with womb wisdom and you come into that gestational pre-verbal state where, I mean, I think this is your this is your expertise of that intuitive frequency. That is the frequency of the womb language, and any all our experiences and our maternal and our ancestral experiences do become stored in our womb. But at the same time, I guess it also becomes the transformative storehouse, because it's the womb. So it is bringing it into a nature of rebirth, where we can rebirth ourselves through our own womb, wisdom. But it's through those portals often of where the trauma lies, or grief. There's a lot of grief. There's a lot of unspoken grief in our wombs, because women have been silenced, and we've had to miscarry in silence, and we've had to bury a lot of things in silence in our womb. And actually, that's why my next circle is called the Voices of Our Womb, which is listening to these voices, to heal, to guide us, or just to listen. We don't even have to have an intention. I think just giving the space to listen is often very confrontational, or healing, or cathartic, or all those things.
I love that. Yeah, it's very inquisitive to stop and talk to our bodies in certain ways, and just our feelings inside, and whether it's that actual origin. And I don't know, you're probably familiar with the book Womb Wisdom, and I haven't read it in many years, but the book, one thing that always stood out in my mind was that the woman that wrote the book says the womb has its own soul. And it's so poetic and so pure. I was like, yeah, like what does that mean? The womb has its own soul, like its own existence. And it's like you said, things can get buried. It's a portal. And many years ago, I don't know what the stats are now, but I know that women's like getting uterine cancers, ovarian cancers are pretty present, and can be, going up and down. But you don't hear people saying that about men's bodies, which is fascinating, really.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I do believe our womb does communicate with us, and our symptoms and our diagnoses, I think, are the way it communicates with us. And it's not really telling us that, well, I mean, in most cases, you can probably always find an exception, but that it's not telling us that something is wrong and has to be kind of like externally fixed. It's telling us more that our body's not in alignment, and there are positive things we need to do to get into alignment, to experience our greatest health trajectory, our greatest thrive. And when our body is experiencing symptoms, it's not about numbing or quietening that symptom. It's actually about listening and leaning in. You hear what you need to do to create more balance in your body. So it's not like oh, you're ill kind of thing. It's more like how wonderful my body is communicating with me that I need more rest. Let me rest. I think, our headache, am I drinking enough water? And when we start listening to that and responding, it's very inconvenient in today's society, because it's very, I live pretty rurally, basically in a holiday town, but I think most of the world is moving very, very fast beyond our biological resources, actually. So our body's shouting.
Yeah, and this is, coming back to that, I wouldn't even call it innate connection to embodiment, right?
I lost you.
Oh, I was saying that in like even we
Innate?
say intuition, but like innate embodiment, like and I understand the obstacle to me, I mean, how I see it is nervous system trauma. Like that's the obstacle. You know what I mean? It's like, and that one is the hard one, but how do we then, more and more as a global community, I feel like we're doing that in the past few years, like coming back to embodiment, like you are the wisdom holder of your reality, like how you perceive and connect with the world, even when you make mistakes, even when there's fear. it's like, can't we still celebrate the love of people? Like, especially in pregnancy, especially in intervention. I know, when I say intervention, I work with tons of women in conception intervention. And really, I'm not telling
Right.
them not to do these things, but I want them to really sit, right? And it's like,
Right.
really slow down and really listen to what your body's asking for. And it doesn't mean, like, let's say you need some estrogen and your body's feeling weird. That's okay, because if you're stimulating things, it's not an emotion. It's like you're stimulating things physiologically, but also sitting quietly. I like to use the word is, and then saying, is this what I need? Is it not? Or am I scared right now to know if it's a yes or no? It's like, okay, right? It's like, let's go there, because I feel like then you're going to get to the place of the unwinding of the healing and bringing baby being into this world, right? And doing it with many different parts, we'll say. And coming back to that wisdom, I love the womb wisdom. I feel like, imagine if all women were like, even conception, pregnancy, even postpartum and beyond, it's like, oh, my womb has wisdom. And how do I bring the sacredness and the innateness of just being? And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It's like, that's where people are like, women are like, no need for perfection. It's just love, really.
Yes, I love that.
Mm.
Yeah, I love what you said there. And for a long time, I've kind of also chased where does it start?
Mm.
You could start at pregnancy, but then it starts at conception, but then it
Mhm.
starts at preconception, but then it starts at kind of puberty,
Mhm.
but then it starts at birth. So you kind of keep running this
Yeah.
story. And I've kind of suddenly sunk into like a feeling that actually preconception, preparing for
Yes.
pregnancy, not like this, I'm trying to get pregnant
Mm.
kind of trajectory, but more like we're preparing our body to receive a child, to receive this baby. And it amalgamates the spirit baby connection with the physical preparation or
Mhm.
the so beautifully for me. And I think that's like, I think I finally found my starting point.
Yeah. I know we can go on and talk about, I feel like we've said so much, and I feel like we could break each little section into its own podcast.
Yeah, now I
There's,
must start a
right?
podcast and invite you.
Yeah. So I want to just kind of come into the end here. I feel like I don't know if we missed this, but we're going to kind of shift the conversation for a moment into the birth keeper. I kind of know what it is, but again, maybe
Right.
others are like, well, what does that mean? And what does that mean? Where's that term? I see it everywhere for years in all kinds of places around the world. What can you say about that?
Well, it was an interesting journey for me also because I entered the world with the title of doctor. Even though
Mm,
I was acting like a midwife, many people call me midwife, but I had the title of the doctor, and I didn't assume to take the title of a midwife because um, even though I really, really wanted to, I really wanted to be a midwife, I wasn't. Um, technically. So I found I was kind of on a search for a term that didn't brand me as a doctor, because when people hear doctor, they don't really want you to attend the home birth in the circles I
mm,
was. I don't want a doctor at my home birth. That's why I want to be at home. And I'm like, but I'm not really a doctor, but I'm not a midwife, but I act like a midwife. So birth keeper became a very beautiful solution. And I think I first heard from that term from Robin Lim.
oh,
Robin Lim in
yes.
Bali, and we visited her and Bhumi Sahat in 2015. And I think that's when Birthkeeper landed for me, because I felt like I could be that. And I felt like
Mm,
that was a title I wanted. And then fast forward to a couple of years ago, when everyone was becoming a birthkeeper. And then I thought, well, my ego, I'm not really everyone. I am a doctor. And so I
mm,
kind of like didn't feel comfortable in that terminology anymore, but I like the word still, because for me, I started seeing kind of yes, people claiming that and not upholding what I felt birthkeeper
mm,
meant. And for me,
mm,
birthkeeper means very specifically you're keeping birth safe
Mm-hmm.
and sacred. You're not cowboying it, you're not hillbillying it. You are being safe and sacred. And I wanted those two words, and I couldn't find them in the newer title of people claiming birth keeper, because anybody could, it seemed. So what then, birth worker? But it's not work. It's play. So birth keeper to me encompasses basically safe and sacred. And then I've shifted out of referring to myself as that, and I don't know what I refer to myself now. Actually, I think I'm Gori, and it's womb wisdom as medicine. And that's kind of been my own growth, I guess, also, because well, birth has become so much more also than the physical act of birth, and so has birth keeper. And I think maybe I'm moved a bit more into womb wisdom keeper, or it doesn't matter. I don't have to have a title anymore.
I love birth keeper, and I've seen the word for many years, and I've also sat in circle with Robin Lim when she came here to a birth center in LA so long ago with birth professionals. And I never considered myself a birth professional, but I hung out in that space, and I would go to events and different things that they would have many years ago. It's like 10 years ago. They don't even do this anymore. But I was always
professional. But
yeah.
Professionals also, it's, because I'm kind of like anti the whole kind of professional, and I do believe every woman can be. So yeah.
No, yeah, I remember at the time this was me looking for some sense of where I belonged, and I realized I didn't belong in the spiritual community, or I didn't belong in the birth community. I was like, okay, I'm just in this nebulous in between place, and I had to accept that.
Yeah, I would think you're a birth professional.
Yeah, it's weird. In the beginning, I was like, I wasn't really sure where it was, and because I'm not a midwife, I'm not a doula. And so, but I would consider myself a birth keeper. And I know a woman that I've worked with who came to me with bereavement, who's such a gifted woman, and opened up circle and space and learned more about birth keeping. And she said one time that everybody can be a birth keeper, and that's really the purpose. Everybody that gets to that, you said, I love that sacred and safe place. And this is someone that's connected to even free birthing. And again, it doesn't matter, hospital birth, free birth, home birth. It's like you can be a birth keeper, as I feel like you were saying. It's just, I love that safe and sacred. It's really, yeah. So maybe someday I'll add that to my long title.
Yes. Keeping birth safe and sacred. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And it's, again, it's the navigation and journey for each individual person. And we don't know what happens in birth. I feel like it just unravels and folds in the moment. And I think that's the service we can do to women. Like, prepare for your pregnancy, whatever that means. And what preparation to me is, being physically, emotionally, mentally available as much as you can. And then, when you arrive to the big show, you surrender to whatever is, and you just kind of see then what comes. I almost feel like, right? It's just being very present. And I hold that for all women. I hold that for all birthing women, that they can find their innate love and their connection, and show up to birth as the best they can.
Yeah, if there was ever one thing that's like could like, what's the word? If there was one thing that could say, yes, if you did that thing, you'll have this birth that you want, then we would do that one thing. But there isn't. Birth happens.
Yeah, good point.
It happens anyway, and despite, and maybe if, and only if, and because of, but we never know why. What will make that birth happen? So the best thing, what I say in pregnancy, there's three things. The one is nutrition, just eating well consciously. And number two is, when you leave your care provider, your birth keeper, that you feel good and heard and not bullied or abused. And actually, you should feel like a fucking goddess when you leave your birth keeper. And the third one is to come into your own intuition and connect with your baby. And connect with your baby every day. And those three things are still my kind of three pillars of connecting with your baby, leaving your caregiver feeling good, and nutrition.
I love that. This is perfect as we're coming to the end. Give us that great wisdom to take forward and carry through. And I want you to share just ways people can connect with you. I know you have a lot of courses and awesome things happening, your website, any ways to contact you, social media.
Thanks, Kay. I am on Instagram, and the name there is Gory Low _ MD. I've been through a few phases, and I just changed it from Womb Wisdom as Medicine to my name, which is just kind of owning up who I am. Anyway, so now you'll find me under that name.
Can they find you through two websites or no? Can they find you through two of these websites?
Through my website, drgorylow.com is my website.
Okay, great.
And my Instagram, I just moved back to Gory Low from Wisdom. So that so my website's drgorylow.com. But I'm sure you can get the spelling from the podcast. And I do have courses. I'm running now a Sacred Model of Birth course, which is teaching a sacred model of birth. And it's got to a deep understanding of the womb wisdom and the sacred feminine and the design of our, really the language of our wombs and birth. I have a few kind of complete smaller courses or modules that you can see on my site, also to do with a specific intensive I had last year, the wisdom of birth. And I have a few postpartum care modules, for birth keepers to train to care for postpartum moms. And that works with the whole elemental approach, bringing in earth, water, air, fire, as an understanding of supporting moms after birth, alignment with the nature. And then I also have one for moms. You can see, so I won't go too much detail there. And then I have opened up a womb room, which is a Zoom online monthly gathering to delve deeper into wisdoms of the womb, and also not just the theory and the talky stuff, but more of the practical experiential stuff. So I have coming up the voices of the womb, and I have a special opportunity, but that's kind of time dependent. So maybe for anyway, Dr. Sarah Buckley is going to be speaking about oxytocin as a special guest in my course. So it's basically those three things. Yeah. I do have exciting things coming up, but I don't want to clutter it too much. So that's what I'm working with now.
Awesome.
And we have the exciting project we're going to do together.
Yes, we are. We're going to do a project. You're all going to stay tuned, because what is that? What does that mean? So exciting. Sacred womb, good. Sacred birth keeper, sacred. Well, thank you, Gory, for being here. Yeah, sacred baby. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kelly. Every time we connect, it's so deeply resonating. And thank you for being the voice of our babies.
Yes, you as well. And I want to, go ahead. Sorry.
We must have another podcast, because what I really want to delve in with you is connecting with the babies as the birth keeper.
Whoa. Wow. Okay. The babies as the birth keepers. Ooh, that's a good one. Yes, absolutely. We will.
Yeah,
We will
because
connect
we have
again.
that experience, and I think a lot of birth keepers might even come into that work because of that unconscious experience or
Yeah,
subconscious.
amazing.
Baby birth keeper.
Hmm. Trademarked. No. Well, thank you again,
Yeah.
Gori, for being here.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Wonderful.
And thank you for joining episode 169, Womb Wisdom is Medicine, bringing a sacred model of birth care for everyone. Thank you for joining Spirit Baby Radio with your host, me, Kelly. And please join my newsletter for Spirit Baby 101 video on tips and practices. Order my book, It's a Journal, Sacred Communication, a Spirit Baby Journal, and Cards for Your Healing Journey, Spirit Baby Oracle Cards, Soul Answers from Spirit Baby. To learn more about my services in supporting people all around the world in private one-on-one sessions, online classes, programs, and private VIP retreats, you can reach me at kellyannmeehan.com or spiritbabymedium.com, as well as on Instagram at spiritbabymedium, and email is spiritbabymedium@gmail.com. Remember to always listen to your heart communication, and your spirit child says hello. Thank you for joining.